Welcome, everybody. I think we're pretty much all here. We've got Anne and Kathy, and we've got a delegation. And we've only had one person saying they couldn't come, Ashley. So I think, is that good for a roll call? Everyone here except for Ashley. Yeah, great. So we'll start by the land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that the County of Haliburton is located on Treaty 20 Mississauga territory and in the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations, which are Curve Lake, Rama, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog Island, Beausoleil, and Georgina Islands First Nations. We acknowledge a shared presence of Indigenous nations throughout the area and recognize its original Indigenous inhabitants as the stewards of its lands and waters since time immemorial. May I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda, please? Great, Walt and Lisa.
Be resolved that the April 10th, 2024 Haliburton County Joint Accessibility Committee agenda be approved.
All in favor? Great. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest today? Seeing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to accept the minutes? Anne? And sorry. Oh, and Ben, sorry, Ben, I didn't even look up on the screen. Anne and Ben.
Be it resolved that the minutes of the November 22nd, 2023 meeting of the Haliburton County Joint Accessibility Committee be adopted as circulated.
All in favor? And that's carried. Great. Thanks very much. Well, first up on the agenda, we've got a visitor with us. Kelsey McComb is here from Five County Children's Center. Thank you so much for joining us. And you're going to be telling us a little bit about your experiences in Haliburton. That'd be great. And if you don't mind popping your microphone on, and there are slides to follow too. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Will I be able to see the slides?
Yeah.
All right, great. So I have worked at 5 counties I work at the Lindsay site, but I also work up in Haliburton County, and I've been doing that for almost 8 years now. You want to go next slide there, Ben? So my job is obviously working with the pediatric population. And I do a lot of consultation at schools just for the accessibility and participation piece. So kind of adding in ramps where they need to be, kind of looking at like the bathroom accessibility piece of it, playgrounds, and then a whole bunch of equipment that helps kids participate more in the classroom and outside and in school trips and just in general to make sure that they are able to do everything else that their classmates are doing. And then also just in terms of like so we have 2 programs. We have our school-based one, and then we have our more home-based one. So within that program, that's more of looking at kind of home and community access. So just at home in terms of, again, looking at kind of how they enter and exit the home and kind of how they access everything inside and the equipment and everything like that they would need. And then just more in the community, I find, especially up here, I get to put my thinking cap on and get creative, just in terms of the opportunities that are up here for kind of recreation and stuff like that and accessing it. In general, you need a more rugged wheelchair up here to access some of the trails and all of that stuff, and people's driveways as well, and then just looking at kind of actually in the community, like downtown, sometimes looking at different stairs and different buildings and stuff like that some families need to access and kind of how we work around that. And sometimes it's a goal to be able to kind of get up the stairs on the backside of like the main street of Haliburton to get up those stairs. So that's pretty much that. And then also there's a little bit of an arm of recreation. So kind of how can things be adapted so some of those kids can participate in that as well.
Anybody who's on screen can hear you better. Just keep the microphone forward.
Oh, it moves. I did not know that. Sorry, guys. Yeah. If you want to go to the next slide. So just in terms of some of the equipment that kind of I've used up here at schools and both kind of in the community for home. So the first slide here, it's an all-terrain wheelchair. And then kind of it comes with different attachments. So kind of there's ski to access it in the snow, and then there's kind of beach wheels for more sandy areas. And then obviously just the standard wheels. And that's been successful kind of to access trails and kind of outdoor areas at school and things like that. I know at our other sites, some places have like, we've got a loan kind of system where we have one at 5 counties, and then families who are interested can access that, and then they can kind of try it out and stuff like that. So it's more of like a loan covered item. And kind of the sizing is pretty standard, and then you can kind of adapt it. So it's like a full adult size one as well. And I know that kind of in different communities, some have this available, and then they just kind of have it able to use to access some of the trails and stuff. If you want to go on the next slide there. Again, there's just thinking about kind of more winter stuff. There's the sledge, and again, this is something in our loan closet, just in terms of like accessing those winter activities. So at the arena, but also out on the lake when it's frozen enough. And then you want to go one more slide there. And then this is just some of the grant opportunities that kind of we know of, just in terms of those community ones. There's ones for Jumpstart, which is kind of, there's the child specific one, which kind of we as 5 counties get more involved in. But I know that there are some community grants available as well, just for that participation and kind of recreation and modifications and stuff like that. And then also Parasport. Again, they have a great loan covered as well. And they also have community grants for the accessibility piece as well. And I think I just have one last slide that says questions. So.
That's lovely, thank you. Any questions from the room? Cease.
I just want to make one comment, and no disrespect, Walt, but I'd rather watch sledge hockey than regular hockey.
Yeah, please, Kathy.
Do you have an equivalent of you in the adult community? Because I look at the loan cupboard and think of the things that you can loan from or borrow from the library, and a lot of adults would use the trails and that sort of thing. Is there an equivalent?
I would say there's physio and OT that go through kind of home and community care, but they're pretty specific and based on like they kind of are very specific for those clients that need it in the home. In terms of like an actual community physio or organizations, there's not really an equivalent. But again, through the grants and stuff, I know that some communities have made that equivalent like library loan, and that's what they've used some of the grants for, to kind of have that access there as well.
Any other questions?
Hi, Ms. McComb. A question for you is, can you tell us more about what you might have seen yourself or what you might have heard about from parents or kids about gaps and barriers in this community compared to what you might see elsewhere? So, for example, is there something that people would desire in this community that you've seen in place in Lindsay or your other catchment areas?
I think just in terms of we're trying to run more groups up in this area. And we have a great recreation program that kind of I've partnered with our recreational therapist to try to increase the opportunities up here. And just in terms of just building that capacity and kind of partnership gaps and things like that. That tends to be what is reportedly the most, that they're looking for those opportunities to kind of participate in the community and recreation opportunities, but they're not sure how to approach it. So that's been kind of in the past little bit, that's been a huge goal for myself and the rec therapist, is to try to see how we can help with that. In terms of access, I think just in general, it's a different, like if you look at kind of city of Kawartha Lakes, mainly Lindsay compared to here, just in terms of the, they have the like Lindsay, oh, what is it called? It's the limo. I cannot think of what that acronym stands for, but it's kind of accessible transportation, and it helps out in terms of like getting to appointments and stuff like that. And then it's an accessible vehicle that kind of goes around and has certain stops that it makes. And then you can also like kind of like the community care piece of it, that they can kind of set up that transportation. But again, it's more local to Lindsay. I would say I also hear a lot about swimming programs, because that tends to be great for our population in terms of that opportunity to kind of get in the water and build strength that in a different way. And then obviously you guys have the lakes in the summer and stuff like that. So that tends to kind of help out a little bit. And then just looking at modifications there. But yeah, I would say the biggest thing tends to be the recreation piece right now, is the opportunity to kind of to get in there. And again, just because I would say in terms of schools, the schools up here have been fantastic, and they're really game to kind of modify as they need to, and are kind of, their playgrounds are a bit of a challenge, but kind of they've been trying to work on that as well, just for that accessibility piece. And I know that kind of in this community for the accessible playgrounds, like there's the one in Minden, and kind of just building on those pieces as well.
So I have a question, and then if we could go to C. So if we shift over to the municipal and county side for a moment, we've got a number of folk in this building and in the community with their eye on the ball. We've got our community safety and well-being coordinator. We've got this committee. Our public works folk are fully aware of AODA standards and are, they've got their eye on that. But having said all of that, what would your advice be to our townships or our county in terms of the role that perhaps we could be playing, but we're not aware that we could be playing, or the gaps that we're not even aware that we're missing? Is there any message that you would have for us here?
Again, I think it's, and again, I know as 5 counties, like we're trying to reach out more into the community and get a little bit more involved that way, just because we do have a bit of knowledge in terms of what our kiddos are looking for. But just in terms of like recreation as a whole, and kind of those opportunities and the accessibility piece, I know kind of when our kids tend to age out of our program, it's kind of like, oh, what do we do? Right? So kind of, because again, there's not a great kind of pass along, right? Like it's kind of they age out of school, and you're like, okay, here's everything that you could possibly need. Hopefully here's the plan, and kind of there are some day programs, but kind of just developing those opportunities and having kind of access to different pieces of equipment. I think those are all great ideas to kind of expand upon. And I know just in terms of like kind of some of the accessible bathrooms that you guys have done at different like places, and kind of the door buttons obviously and stuff like that, I think those are like great starting points. And then you're just looking at, okay, what else could we do to kind of support that population? And just knowing in terms of like that geriatric population as well, kind of some of the ideas can carry forward to those as well.
Yeah, great. Ben, did you have a question as well?
Yes, I did. That's why I clicked the raise hand on the screen.
Thanks.
What are we doing, and what has the feedback been in terms of the wheelchairs from the people who have been getting the loans for them, in terms of like are the people using them comfortable? Is the maintenance being kept up in terms of the wheelchairs? And I was also wondering if possibly, because you've already discussed the two grants, is there something that we could do to try to help the people in our community who may be a little bit more economically disadvantaged, who are not really able to apply for said grants?
In terms of the feedback that we've got from the all-terrain wheelchair, it has generally been great. I mean, it tends to be much better than the standard wheelchair because it's meant to kind of go off-road. And then just in terms of the versatility of the skis and kind of the beach wheels and stuff like that has been really beneficial to kind of help some families access things that they normally wouldn't be able to, and kind of have that enjoyment as well. And in terms of the upkeep, it's actually it's a pretty good sturdy chair. And kind of the vendors that we work with, they have been great to kind of, if there's something that we need to look at, then they've been really good to kind of be like, okay, yep. And again, I think some of the schools, they've had them for like 4 years and like have needed nothing, and they use them on a regular basis. Like they get put through the ringer and they hold up pretty well. So, and they are very lightweight, and you can like take them right apart, and it comes in like a carry bag, so it's easier to transport than this massive thing that you see on the screen. So it breaks right down for easier transport.
Okay.
And then in terms of the grant piece, I will say I write a lot of letters and I sign my name, and then somebody else figures out kind of where that money is coming from. But I think some of the grants, especially the Canadian Tire one, their Jumpstart program, it is more community based, so that you guys can have that opportunity and kind of those things to help out that participation piece. And then kind of those people who kind of are a little bit more, would need that support, can access that through the community, versus trying to figure out how to navigate that on their own.
Okay.
I'll go to Cease and then to Anne.
My only question was, like, for instance, when you talked about the off-road scenario, we had a bunch of years ago, we had a guy that lived out where we are, a great guy. Unfortunately, life dealt him a bad deal and lost the use of his lower legs. But before he could get a driver's license, because he never needed one, didn't want one. Then he became a mobility issue, but he lived on a dirt road going out. So what we ended up doing is we worked with the MTO, and we got him a snowmobile license so he could drive his snowmobile. The only other way he could get into town because of the roads was on an ATV. That they would not do. And the reason for that was, as far as they were concerned, it was a motor vehicle. So we tried to find out if we get a restricted use, restricted license, but it sounds like this particular vehicle that you're talking about would be capable of doing that, because it wasn't like a dirt trail, but it was more than much less than a paved road.
The one that I have kind of used before, it's so somebody can wheel it, sort of thing, and then somebody can push it as well to help out. There are some more all-terrain like power options as well, that the chairs and scooters are a little bit more rugged, but just in terms of those longer distances, again, I don't know that quite that distance, but kind of the all-terrain chair, it would probably do that, but kind of it's helpful if somebody is pushing and somebody is wheeling. Not to say that you can't wheel independently, but and it is also quite low to the ground, so just the transfers in and out of it are doable, and it helps you access those places you wouldn't otherwise be able to access, but it is a trickier transfer, so to get out or into the chair than like a standard wheelchair would be as well, or a snowmobile.
So one thing that I was very interested in, the how things transition from when you're a school age person and then going into being, an adult, and then, reaching your other years. It would be really helpful, wouldn't it, to have have this all the way through all the ages? 'Cause I know I've been fairly heavily involved in a sailing program, accessible sailing, and that went really, really well. All ages, really all abilities could help that. Is there something like that here? Because that works for school age kids, middle, and people can just open their just go off sailing with somebody. Is there anything like that, or?
I know that there's the adapted ski program at Sir Sam's. And then there's also like there's walkabout farms and stuff like that that has that accessibility piece as well. But in terms of like physio and occupational therapy and speech therapy, kind of more those therapy-based things, there's really not. I agree that it would be definitely beneficial and great if there was that carry through. But kind of once you kind of get past the kind of either 18 or 21, depending on your school exit age, and then kind of the supports kind of are really starting to go needs-based and like high needs-based. It's kind of like when you come out of the hospital, or if there's like a really challenging accessibility need because needs have changed sort of thing. That's kind of when things get flagged versus that natural carry through, right? Which is unfortunate.
Is there a way we could get a natural carry through? It's just that, everyone wants to help kids because kids are cute, right? And then when you get to be, a little bit older, you're no longer the sort of cutesy, and it always seems such a shame that these programs are not available to carry all the way through. It's just obviously a comment that it would be very nice to have the programs that are available for school age kids, the same programs when they age out of it, and then, further along the line would be wonderful to get these programs, you know what I mean? So it seems almost cruel to give it to you as a child and then take it away from you as soon as you leave school.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think some of the adult day programs that they do try to have those opportunities. And I think that especially with the structure of school and stuff like that, to try to kind of mimic that as they start to age out. Again, I think that one of the roles for us, we do kind of say somebody comes out of the hospital, we're kind of pretty intensive then. And then once they stabilize and kind of we've got a good thing going, then kind of it's more of a check-in and kind of that sort of thing. And then hopefully at some point we discharge depending on the kid. And then we discharge to community programs. So we think kind of helping develop those programs within the community, like the sailing and kind of those recreation ones where you're still getting the benefit of movement and everything like that. I think that would be beneficial across the age range, right?
Because a lot of the time, once you've got the equipment in place, it can be used for all ages, especially, not trying to belabor the point, but the boating ramps and the boating winches, they can be used for any age. It's not like it's just for children. So
yeah, and I think kind of approaching those opportunities as, okay, yes, this will work for the pediatric population, but hey, this would also work for a young adult. This will also work for kind of an older adult. I think that's definitely a great approach because you can kind of, again, that equipment is the same. Sometimes it's just a little bit smaller for kids. So, but kind of those approaches should kind of be able to carry across. And it's not like you're trying to rebuild the system once they hit a certain age. You're just using those strategies that worked when they're younger and kind of you apply those across the age range.
So is this something that we could talk about with, with the works department and things like that, if they're doing anything, that maybe it's the age appropriateness should maybe be a consideration when it's first being started, that, if you've got a winch or a wheelchair or all-terrain wheelchair or something like that, that it could be, one that would work for multiple ages.
Yeah, no, that's really setting off some interesting questions that are kind of pinging back and forth in my mind as the two of you speak. I'm aware in Algonquin Highlands, for example, we've got 27 docks and landings, public docks and landings, to help people, particularly with water access only cottages, to get to their cottages. And I'm not sure we've ever had the accessibility conversation there. And yet that is part of the life follow on, isn't it? It's to be able to enjoy your your leisure residences and everything else. So yeah, I think that's a really good conversation to have. And maybe a first step would just be to invite someone from Public Works into our next meeting just to chat, to find out what, where they sit with those sorts of things. And again, Algonquin Highlands, which is my township, in Dorset, we've got adult exercise equipment on the outside of our recreation center. And they're, this is not for kids signs and things, so that our seniors in particular can avail themselves of that equipment. And it's another opportunity where maybe just by making slight modifications, we can include that much more of our population into that. So yeah, Kathy.
It would be nice to hear from the Public Works departments, because I think about parking. And if there's an accessible parking spot, are the ramps cut out to get there? So I watched somebody in a town nearby try to get out of their van with their walker, and they were in the right spot, but it was a lift to get up. And my understanding is, shouldn't there be a cutout to go, and so that they may be able to address those minor nuances to us?
Yeah, I'll certainly follow up and we'll see what kind of conversation we can have. Yeah, please.
I just have a little comment about that. I would say having the accessible spot and then having that cutout in the right spot is like a game changer. But the other thing that kind of comes into play sometimes too is different vans you get in them a different way, right? So say you have some vans are like, hey, you get in, the accessible ramp comes out through the trunk. Some are through the side. Some kind of are mechanical. Some you have to have the room for you to pull it out yourself. And sometimes it's not even an accessible vehicle at all. They're just trying to get out of their vehicle, and they need enough space to land on a flat surface and then kind of use their walker or use whatever device that they are going to use, and kind of have that cutout close, that you're not having to kind of wheel through the parking lot and then kind of find that ramped area, but having it close to that spot if possible tends to be super helpful.
Yeah. Yes, Sue, please.
So as you know, our family's experience has been great with the Five Counties rental program, being able to access that equipment. And also we have found that it's been, I worried about bringing it, for example, to the AJ LaRue Arena. I didn't know what that would look like, but the staff there was wonderful about inviting us in with the sledge and inviting me in with my very poor skating skills. But they were great about it all. I'm wondering, when you speak about a loan library, were you, and maybe you said this, but were you speaking to municipal loan libraries? So is that loan library accessible at arenas or at swimming pools or at beaches where you might be able to pick that equipment up that you've seen throughout the catchment area?
I know, like, I grew up in Northumberland County, and obviously my parents still live there, but just in terms of the resources there, I know that, like, for Coburg Beach, for instance, they have like the path that like rolls out so a wheelchair can kind of get down. I know one of the conservation areas, they have their all-terrain wheelchair that you can kind of sign out for the day to access their trails and stuff like that. So, and then I think one of the arenas, just one within Five Counties catchment, I know that they have a couple sledges that kids can kind of try out and stuff like that. It just has to be kind of, you have to like call in beforehand and just ask, hey, is there one that we can use for this day? And then they make it available, sort of thing. And obviously everybody's got the forms to sign off on and that they understand how to use it and all that great stuff. But
Okay, thanks. I do know that there are, I think Dysart has the water mat, and they might also have I'm not sure if they have an available rental for a mobile water wheelchair. But I've wondered in the past about perhaps a joint collaboration on a grant to be able to help fund loaning libraries throughout the county at at different buildings and landmarks and recreation days. So thanks for that.
And that, it's a good segue that a lot of what we've been talking about is more of a Parks and Rec rather than Public Works. So there are either two conversations or a combined conversation there because they'd be involved too. Yeah, please.
Yeah, one of the, like Ben was talking about parking with, for vehicles and stuff. And as a municipality, you got a bit of a problem. Anytime you can get angular or 90-degree parking, you just make the space wider and you can accommodate whatever you want to accommodate. Where the problem comes is when you get parallel parking. And you're parking on the side of a street where there's a sidewalk and stores and who knows what. You can't make it any wider there because as soon as you do, you're going out into the lane of traffic that's being used. So, you got to be awful careful where you still need the accessibility parking, no argument to that. But now there'll be a restriction within the handicap parking, for the lack of a better term, that only certain aspects of the population can use that particular parking space. Because if you are a wheelchair and you do have a challenge, that probably would not be possible regardless of what we wanted to do, because of this, the ability to, on a thoroughfare, to allow cars to pass. So, but having said that, there's no reason why you couldn't look for spots where parking could be accommodated for wheelchairs that require that extra space.
Any final questions or? Yeah, well,
How much money does it cost for some of these accessible to make these people's life so much more normal and happier? Like, where's $100,000 go?
I will say, in terms of the all-terrain chair, I think the last quote that I got for like everything, so for the ski set, for the balloon wheels, for the whole gamut, it costs about $10,000. And again, that with that in mind, we normally just order the biggest one available so that they can use it for as long as they need it, regardless of how big that they get. But in terms of that $100,000, I think you can, depending on what kind of you want to use that money for, right? If it is kind of that building that equipment loan library, I think that definitely gets you good, like you could build quite a library with that. And then kind of just figuring out the infrastructure and kind of how you're going to let people know that that's available. I think that's the other key, and something that we've definitely found with some of our programs is that kind of you've got to kind of put in the work to make it available, and then you have to let people know that it's available, and then kind of the use of those programs grows as they know about the availability, right? It's not kind of, most of them don't just kind of right off the bat, oh, that's always loaned out. It's kind of like, okay, no, people need to know that it is available, and then kind of that use grows. But kind of in terms of the grants and stuff, I think planning that out and kind of making it work, the money definitely makes a change, and you can get a good chunk of things done with that kind of grant situation.
Yeah, and are the programs well used? I mean, is there ever times when these wheelchairs and these wonderful sledge things are sitting not used?
Obviously, during the summer, the sledges aren't used. But I know like our all-terrain chair, like it's usually out and kind of one family, and then kind of it's loaned out to one family, and then another one's on the list to take it next. Like it definitely rotates through. It's normally not really sitting there and kind of ready to go.
What's the maximum, like, for instance, you're not gonna rent it for 6 months, so you take it for a weekend, you take it for like a planned trip, how does it work?
I know kind of with our program, kind of the family identifies that, hey, we want to use it for this, we want to try it out for there. And then kind of they take it for a set amount of time. So it's an agreed amount of time. And then they return it. I know for our sledges, some families can keep them kind of for the whole skating season because we have quite a few of them. And just in terms of like different sledges, like we have some with like back support, some where somebody can like push it around sort of thing. So there's a whole bunch of different ones that we have. So kind of the sled program tends to be a bit longer, whereas the all-terrain wheelchair is very use-based. It's kind of like, hey, I want to use it for this particular thing. I want to try it out so I can know like, hey, does it make sense for me to get one of these kind of through? Yeah, exactly.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming in and spurring on our conversation. That's tremendous food for thought. And I think quite a bit of follow-up there for us, which is the idea of having you come in. So we really, really do appreciate that. Thanks, Kelsey.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Great. All right. So as we say goodbye to Kelsey, we shall move on to there's some, sorry. Oh, resolution. That's right. That's right. The R is on the first page and I was already on the second page. So could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the delegation? Ben to receive and a seconder. Anne, thank you.
Be it resolved that the County Joint Accessibility Committee receives for information the delegation from Kelsey McComb of Pike County Children's Center, City of Kawartha Lakes and Halliburton.
All in favor? And that's carried. So we've got a piece of correspondence, we call it correspondence, and it's an article that came up on the CBC in January, and it's for information. I don't know if everyone's had a chance to look at it. Some comments with the success of the AODA between its inception and today, and next year being the day or the year that all of these magical changes should have occurred by, and some concerns there by the contributors to the article that they may not in fact reach their goals by 2025. Don't know if anyone has some comments on that to make or insights to share on that or disagreements with it. Yes, Anne.
I don't think it's the first time this has happened. I think the dates have been moving, quite a few times, which is unfortunate. But most of it is driven by, I guess COVID didn't help. It's taken out 3 or 4 years of people's lives for sort of on hold. But it always seems to be keeping moving. So it's kind of sad. But at least it's still going, right? It's not like people are saying, oh, we're just not going to do it. It's just like moving them off more and more. More of a comment, not really anything else, but it certainly seems to be the way with most initiatives with accessibility that the dates get pushed back.
Yeah. There was one part of the article that I didn't quite, I'm not sure if I understood it. Maybe someone can clarify. I'm just going to nip down to it. It said, I don't see it now, of course, but it's something about the AODA is not handling buildings. It's whereas it should, and I probably shouldn't have raised it unless I could had it right there in front of me. Yes. Oh, Ben, yes, sorry. Your the orange hand kind of fades a little bit into the cream wall of your background, so I don't see it flip up. Sorry about that. Ben, go ahead, please.
Well, what I'm thinking is that it's supposed to be 2025 by law that all of these things are put into place. I don't think in our given area that there's I think a lot of people are going to struggle with trying to mandate these laws in older buildings because you may be a business that's been open for years, but it's going to take a lot of like physical work and a lot of finances to try to adjust these old buildings to the new mandations. So what I'm thinking is there a way we could look around, examine the buildings within the county and talk to the business owners and say, okay, if you like, I feel like we should be able to provide certain levels of assistance to businesses, or we should take some of the profit from their businesses and use it to help other individuals.
Right. I don't know what our scope of possible contribution is there. That's a really good question. I would suspect that we can't take some of their money and dedicate it elsewhere unless that has been provincially mandated. But the idea of supporting businesses to make changes that are still lagging, maybe there is a role there in public communications, or I'm not sure what. Sue, do you have any insights into what our role might be as a county?
No, but regarding just the communication, I've wondered about that, about the availability of workshops, ensuring that businesses know about funding that might be available. Because I think our local business owners surely know if their location isn't accessible. I think some have tried to put in some stopgaps along the way. But it can be so costly for them. So yeah, I think maybe just some communication pieces about what funding might be available, and maybe we can do some community engagement to hear from the community about what they are experiencing at local establishments.
So do we know who is the body that is responsible for following up? AODA doesn't have agents in every community. So how does that follow-up piece work in real life?
In real life, it seems to be that somebody will raise a complaint and then
Okay.
it's dealt with on an individual basis. And I do have empathy for old buildings, because a lot of the time it's incredibly hard to
Yeah.
make them accessible, and it just can't happen. So I do have a lot of sympathy, empathy for those people. But it tends to be when somebody makes a fuss, then somebody will do something about it. And really, most of what you have to do is you have to go see your municipality, you have to go see your MP, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Cease.
I think too that a lot of it is, you gotta remember what the purpose of this particular committee is. And that is to give advice more so to the municipalities as to how they could go about doing what they need to do to make it more comfortable. When it comes to the private sector, we can recommend and we can lobby for the sake of words, just use the words the other way around. Usually they lobby us, we can lobby them. But beyond that, I don't think we have a whole lot of jurisdiction for any of it.
Right.
Not that I'm saying we shouldn't do it, I'm merely saying that, you should fix that. We can do our job, but I don't think we actually can do that, whereas we have much more influence on a municipality with regards to how we set up parking, how we do things. Just trying to figure out what our scope is.
I would agree with you, and I'm so impressed with what people here are doing. Halliburton's amazing for generally, as to doing all the things that it does. And I think when you see that, it has a knock-on effect, and other people start to want to do things too. So there's a wonderful community here. I don't think I've ever seen such a lovely community here. And when it's sort of like a knock-on thing, so the municipality is doing its thing to try and get everything going. And I think people look and listen and follow. It's the best way to do it, really.
But I also like the idea of comms, because we do have a few comms folk in the county who could probably fairly easily integrate some of this messaging into their calendars. That's a good point to follow up. I like it. Yeah. And Ben, I think Cease is probably quite right. Our role is very much limited to the township and the county, but it's worth following up just to understand if there's any piece of scope there that could be more encouraging for the private sector. I'm going to go to Kathy first.
So, when I was on similar board in Markham, we did have the public works people come to talk to us because it's things like paved driveways that make things work really easily. Access to restaurants. You can have your ramps, but if you're going over gravel and there's no accessible parking, it's really challenging. And I'm wondering if it is part of the building bylaws, because
Mhm.
I understand if I pave my driveway, I might have to pay, or pave my parking lot, I might have to pay more money in taxes. If I leave it gravel, I don't have to do that. I don't have to have accessible parking if I have a gravel driveway. And I would like to just know, is that truly what the rules are? And that's something where things could change.
Yeah. It kind of feels like we're gonna have a series of departmental one-on-ones to understand how we can support them and how they can inform us as well. Yeah.
One of the things the committee's done in the past too is municipalities, when they're proposing developments, they bring them to committee and they have committee review. We did Sir Sanford Plumbing College as an example. We did the development in Halliburton. So maybe just part of the communication piece might be to just reach out to say that this is available through this committee. We can review your development proposal and make some recommendations as a suggestion.
Yeah. I like it. Yes.
Thank you. Just to my colleague's point, I think that's some important work that we can do on this committee, and just noting that it's really important to come as early as possible in the planning, because otherwise, if you're not here early, when the plan is already made, it's harder to make those changes after the fact. And just, I know this is a message that comes up at each meeting, but just sometimes the what looks good AODA wise isn't always accessible in person. So it's great to be able to take a look at things to see, it might be the standard, but is it actually accessible once you're out there?
Yeah. Yes.
One of the things that we could probably do, and I don't know, as a committee, probably not, but as hopefully, if we had the ability through our municipal staff, is to find out where people who want to be concerned about that kind of stuff, especially if they're in the commercial end of anything, where they can get applications for grants, where they can get the overall capability of compliance that would be subject to financial assistance, because a lot of times that's exactly why they can't do what they do. It just costs a fortune to do that. I mean, we have one guy in Wilberforce that wanted to do that, and by the time he was finished, the ramp would go out 8 feet into the middle of the street. And so that just wasn't viable. It just wasn't an option. Now, had he been able to change the particular exit a little bit, it might have made a difference. So is there an opportunity for him to get funding for that? I don't know. But if there was a place that they could go look, either by putting it on a website or just something simple that not require a tremendous amount of staff influence, it might make it easier.
Great. Well, that's again more good food for thought, and I've taken away some follow-up. I think maybe we'll sit down at some point and discuss how we might move ahead on that and report back with some ideas for next time. Any final thoughts on that piece before? All right, in that case, could I have a mover and a seconder to receive that piece of well, we call it correspondence, but to Kathy and Anne, thank you.
Be it resolved that the county joint Sorry, Benin. Be it resolved that the County Joint Accessibility Committee receives for information the January 2nd, 2024 correspondence titled An Accessible Ontario by 2025. Here's where the province stands on its goal.
All in favor? Carried. Right, so jumping down to 11.1, we've got a brief summary here of updates from member municipalities on accessibility accomplishments. And I don't, were you planning to speak to that at all, Sue? Yeah? Great.
I can. So this is just the standard. Each year, we put together this yearly accomplishments listing from based on the information from the Joint Accessibility Plan to highlight some of the accomplishments that each member municipality has made toward accessibility in their communities. This document before you, the Joint Accessibility Plan 2023, 2027, 2023 accomplishments, has been reviewed by staff at each of the member municipalities. The document itself has been remediated for accessibility, and I believe all municipalities have posted it to their websites for the year. And so we'll work on the 2024 accomplishments in a few months' time.
Great, thank you. Any questions about that list or? Lovely. So if I could have a mover and a seconder to receive. Walt. And Cease, thanks.
Be it resolved that the Joint Accessibility Committee receives for information the 2023-2027 multi-year accessibility plan updates from the member municipalities, and that the updates be shared with Haliburton County Council.
All in favor? That's passed. So sticking with Sue, I wonder if you would give us a bit of an update on the communication boards, and you've circulated some samples too.
Yes, so the sample that was included in your agenda is the park communication sign that is currently being designed for Rotary Beach Park in Haliburton. And there's also going to be another one at Head Lake Park, so of the similar design, but currently we are working with Dysart staff and MacArt Designs to create that board using some funding that Dysart had received a few years ago and is able to needs to be able to use by the end of this year, I believe. That sign is scheduled to be installed in the spring this time. That will be the first AAC board or communication board in a public park within Haliburton County, with more to follow in each municipality. This is the most finalized draft, but I did take back any of the comments I received from this committee. I've also received more feedback I reached out to March of Dimes, to 5 counties, and to users, AAC users in the community, trying to receive as much feedback as possible. It won't be possible to accommodate all suggestions, but the designer has been wonderful about making all the changes that they can make. And we're looking forward to that being installed in the spring.
Yes, yes.
Different question, but same idea. We are going to be making a severe effort to develop Herlihy Park. And we're gonna start opening it up to the public, hopefully this year, which would be kind of cool. For the kind of boards that you have there, is there funding that available to us? And if so, how do we go about doing that? This is the wrong end of the horse. Okay, if you could get that information, if you have it, to Brittany, so that at the end of the day, if we could put in the first phase of it right off the bat, a friendly face for those people who have a challenge.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ryle, and for using that expression, which I have never heard before. I've actually been working with some of the staff in municipalities. So we have, and you might want to correct this if it's wrong, but I believe we've set aside some funding a few years back. We set aside some funding to be able to help each member municipality install a sign. Dysart was able to receive a separate pot of funding, so that's why they'll be installing 2 signs. But I have touched base with Brittany about installing, I believe she mentioned Herlihy Park is the scheduled location for Highlands East. Regarding the funding that Dysart received, I mean that I don't know that specific funding, but there's always funding available throughout the year that municipalities can apply to for possible funding for more signs. But there will be one in each municipality through the county's reserves. I think if there's anything else you wanted to add to that.
No, that's correct. So we did set aside monies for each municipality. I believe it was in either 2020 or 2021 when this came before committee at that time. So there, to your point, Councillor Ryer, there is some funding available, and certainly staff can look into it and advise Brittany for sure.
So the work that's been done on this sign, ideally, that same sign will work in each, the same design will work in each spot, but there might need to be some changes based on equipment or things like that.
Thank you. Any comments or questions about proposed design? Yes, Anne.
I think it's wonderful.
Good. Or ringing. Good. All right, in that case, thank you very much. And we really look forward to seeing that. So we've got a resolution there as well. So could we have a mover and a seconder to receive this report? Ben, I see you're moving and Lisa is seconding.
Be it resolved that the Joint Accessibility Committee receives for information the verbal updates on the AAC communication boards.
All in favor? Carried. And I think we're sticking with you for one final piece, the Inclusive Communities Grant.
Actually, back to 11.3, the Emergency Communication Board. It's a separate.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, okay, good. Yes. So what do we have about emergency communication?
So this is an emergency communication board through developing the communication board for parks. Something that came up was this communication aid that is used in different situations for first responders, at hospitals, in situations where people might not already use a communication device and have one on them. Sometimes medical crisis and other experiences can cause people to not be able to communicate using their mouth. So this picture communication aid can be laminated and stored in ambulances, or some people wear it as a lanyard if they encounter people often who require this type of communication. So this is just one example, but I have shared this example with our tri-services. So fire, ambulance, and police officers throughout the region.
Right. So then this piece would not, the pain rating, that's something that would not be part of the communication board in the park.
Yeah, so this is a separate, this is a separate project, and
This
so
one completely.
yeah. So
Okay.
this is Temple University had this sample. I looked through a few, and this looked to be one that worked for most people. And I don't know that it will be put in place by those who could use it, but it depends on if they'll find it helpful or not. But they do all have access to it. There had been some. We had heard about some situations that paramedics had experienced, that police officers had experienced, where something like that would have been helpful. So now they all have that if they need it, or can find something that works better for them.
Thank you. Any thoughts or questions about that? Yes.
So is this going to be available in sort of all for paramedics and things like that?
So they all have access to it. I sent it to the chief paramedic and the OPP police detachment officer and each of the fire chiefs as well.
Great, thank you. Anything further? And so to 11.4, Inclusive Communities Grant. Do you have anything you wanted to share on that?
This is the last thing for me, everyone. So the Inclusive Community Grant 2024-2025 opened yesterday. We've been speaking about funding, so here is some. I'll just share with you some information. It has officially launched, and applications are due by May 22nd, 2024. The Inclusive Community Grants Program provides funding for projects that help local governments, not-for-profit organizations, and Indigenous communities develop and implement local community action plans that enhance the lives of Ontarians of all ages and abilities. So an action plan may refer to an age-friendly community action plan or other community plans directly related to developing or enhancing inclusion and accessibility, including Haliburton County's Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. Inclusive communities respond to both the opportunities and challenges by creating physical and social environments that support independent and active living, and enabling older adults and people with disabilities to continue contributing to all aspects of community life. The program, this particular grant, will provide up to a maximum of $60,000 per successful applicants. So there is a grant writing workshop this Friday from noon until 1:30. offered by the province. I'm speaking at that to Haliburton County's Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan and how anyone interested in this community can help link their project to the plan. But if anybody is listening at home and would like that information, I can share it as well. And just to note, in the past, I believe last year, Haliburton's Abbey Gardens Community Trust was able to establish an accessible recreational trail system for people of all abilities through this grant, as well in Algonquin Highlands. There was an upgrade, or there will be an upgrade of outdoor accessible pathway lighting at the Dorset Lions Park through this funding.
So how can we find out more information? I have a project in mind.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. We can connect later if you'd like, or it's just Inclusive Communities Grant. If you'd like to Google that, you'll see it. Just make sure that it's 2024 to 2025. And it's open now until May 22nd.
Thank you very much. So we've got also a new agenda item, which is roundtable updates for any of us who are associated with an organization that you'd like to share the news about, anything going on in the community, anything at all really that the others should find interesting. Does anyone have something to share? Yeah.
We didn't have at the brand new $14 million arena accessible parking markers for winter time because of course there's snow and you couldn't see. So that is something that I had spoken with the Director of Community Services and we had put in place, but it was crazy about how we had to go through, like, make sure it was this, make sure it was that, without like just actually doing it. So people have to understand that, you know, it's not just something as simple as throwing up a sign. It has to be, I want to say, legal and conforming. I don't know if that's maybe just municipal terms, but anyway, we do finally have them, which is lovely for winter so that people know where they can park, but it was quite a process.
Huh. Any other updates? No, I think that's probably it then. Anything in the future that you'd like to raise, by all means, come and share. So our next meeting date is June 12th, 2024, and we've got a little bit of homework in the meanwhile to see what we can do to arrange some conversations in the county and at the townships and report back for next week based on, or next session based on a really fruitful discussion today. So thank you everyone for that. Could I have a motion to adjourn? Ben, thanks. And do you need a seconder for the adjournment? And a seconder, Lisa.
Be it resolved that the April 10th, 2024 meeting of the Haliburton County Joint Accessibility Committee now adjourned.
All in favor? Wonderful. Thanks, everybody.